Hello everyone, Nadezhda here, and today's lesson is going to be all about clash coordination in Navisworks. We are going to learn how to export Revit models and create a clash detection report in Navis, and then we are going to learn how to navigate the coordination between different disciplines using both Revit and Navisworks. Let's begin. Today I'm going to be using this one structural model and this one mechanical model. So I'm going to export both of these models so I can use them in the Navisworks. The first step that you have to do is you have to download and install this Navisworks exporter. I'm going to post the link in the description below. It is free and it is very easy to download and install. So once it is installed, all you have to do is export the models you're going to be using with this exporter. So once you have installed it, the first thing you do is you go to export and you find this NWC option. It is not going to exist unless you have installed the exporter. So I click on it and I will find the folder where I'm going to save this file. But before we click save, there are some things that we should check out, and that is this settings here. Once the settings are opened, there are some things that we should keep in mind of. First is whether we want to convert construction parts, and if we are using parts and we want them to be part of the clash detection, we should check this. I make sure that I do not convert link CAD formats and I do not want to convert linked files either. I also make sure that I check off the export room geometry, because unless you do that, you are going to have the volume of the room and you do not want that. And also one important thing is, what are you exporting? Do you want the entire project or you just want the current view or selection? In my case, I can leave this in either current view or entire project, because we are exporting from our 3D view. In this case, it is going to be current view. This part is also extremely important because this is where you choose which coordinates are going to be exported. If your file coordinates are set up, you want to keep the option to shared, because that way once we export, everything is going to fall nicely in place. Of course, if you have not georeferenced your model, then you should keep this as project internal. I will post the link with the lesson about georeferencing and coordinates below, so you know how to set this up if you are beginning your project, or if you have already started and you want to georeference your project. I have both of these options as the lesson, so I'm going to post them in the description below if you want to georeference your project. Of course, like I said, if you do not want to do that, you can keep it as project internal, but generally it is recommended to georeference your project so you have easy time exporting, importing, linking and everything else. I'm going to keep shared here because this is a georeference project. And once I have set all that up, I click OK. Of course, previously, before starting this video, I have already exported this, so we can now go to the Navis. I open Navis program, and the first thing I do is I create the new project. Once we have the empty project, what we do is we use this append option. And here we choose which of the models we want to use. Generally, with coordination, you basically have few options. You can either coordinate model by model, that means discipline by discipline, or you can do like a bunch of the models, but I never recommend doing bunch of the models because I do want to do it discipline by discipline, because it is a lot easier. You have more control over what is going on, because if you lump all of these models together, you are going to have like thousands of clashes depending on your model size, and you are also going to be kind of confused in this entire process. So actually doing it model by model is much easier. Though it does seem like more work, but you do want your work to be actually controlled. You do want to have a control over what you do. So I do recommend doing discipline by discipline. For example, if we start by structure, you first want to do structure and mechanical, then you want to do structure and water and sewage, then structural and electrical, etc. Basically, you are going to create a lot of these reports. It is going to take some time, but you are going to have much more control over what you do. That is at least my recommendation. You of course try a couple of times some different options and see what works for you. In today's lesson, I am going to create a clash report of this structural model and mechanical model. So I'm going to select the structure coordination and HVAC coordination files. These are two files that I mentioned, and I click open. So as you can see, we can see both of these files in our model. I'm just going to click top here so I can see everything, and then you can just see what goes on here. We see we have our mechanical equipment and we also have our structural model. As you can see here in my properties, I have opened the sets and I have opened the Clash Detective. If this is not something you see, you should check this icon. You should open Clash Detective so you can see this window here. And I'm going to use this add test tool, which is going to be basically our first test for clash detection. And I'm going to call it the structure HVAC test. And now what I do is I select one model on one side and another model on other side. The reason why you have both of these models on both sides is that you can actually do the clash detection of the same model. For example, if you wanted to see if the mechanical model has internal clashes, like if some duct clashes with some other duct or some other pipe, you can just select both of these models like on both sides. But in my case, I'm going to use structure and I'm going to use mechanical here. And basically here you can choose first which of the tolerance you want. If you have, for example, some small distance that you want to tolerate, you can increase this. I'm going to leave it on the default. And here you have few clash types. First one is hard. It is basically the default. It finds which of the elements are actually clashing with each other, and hard conservative is very similar. Clearance actually finds which of the elements are being too close to each other even though they are not fully touching, and duplicates actually search which elements are modeled in the exact same positions. I leave this to hard and I click run test. But before we continue with the lesson, let's hear a word of a sponsor, which is also actually me. If you want to learn Revit with me, I have actually created a course which is designed specifically to make you ready to work in Revit independently or in big teams. In this course, you also have the assignments where you get to exercise everything that you learn, and you also get to ask questions directly from instructors. So everything that was not clear to you, everything that you need help with, I answer these questions the same day. So you don't just watch videos, but you interactively learn Revit. I have also made the special attention to the people who already have some experience but in AutoCAD, so I have made sure to actually help you transition from AutoCAD to Revit very smoothly. While this is a beginner's course, it is also very useful for people who already have some experience but want to level up their Revit knowledge. To see the course content, go to thebimtonic.net, and I hope to see you in these lessons. So let's continue with this lesson. And now we get our list of clashes. And as you can see, there are 1,500 clashes here. But don't worry if you have this like giant numbers. Some of these are actually the same clash, like few of the different parts of the same elements are clashing with each other. Basically, when you solve one clash, you get a couple of clashes less. So it's not as much as we see here, though it does seem a little bit intimidating sometimes. But basically here you have the number of clashes. And for example, let's just pick any of these. And once you select one clash, you actually get the image of that clash. So you can see which elements are clashing, and pretty much each of the selection, once you select it, you can actually see where it is and what it is. So once you see all of these clashes, the next step for you is actually exporting these clashes so you can work on them. So now you go to the report option, and here you have the contents of the report. That means basically which of these tabs you want to have visible in your report. In my case, I am going to leave everything here. What is extremely crucial to you is actually image, grid location, item ID. It is important to turn on item ID if it's not turned on by default, because that is actually what you're going to use to check out this clash in Revit. So basically I'm just going to leave this as it is, and we can choose whether we want old test or current test. Basically, the more models you add, the more tests you create. If we are to, for example, next create the structure with LV, for example, then we would have 2 tests here, so you can export all of them, or you can just export current one. In this case, since we only have 1 test, we can export the current test, and here you choose which option you want. I think this default one is the best, so we click Write Report. We are just going to create one folder on desktop. I'm just going to call it Clash Report, and we click Save. And now this is going to take a little bit time, depending on your model size, depending on the number of models you have. And now it is generated a couple of minutes later, so let's check it out. You basically have first this file, which you can open. And once I open this file, you can see what it looks like. We basically have the image of the clash, and you can click on each image and it will generate in the bigger size, so you don't have to change it in this table. And you also get the folder with the image files you can also open in your computer. Basically, this provides for the bigger images of the clash report. And after the images, you have the clash name. And here in these item 1 and item 2 columns, you have first the structural elements, and in item 2 you have the mechanical elements. So now that we have these elements IDs, we have to go in Revit and we have to check out what is going on, because obviously looking at the image is not going to give us the complete picture of how this clash looks. So let's just pick one random clash. Let's just take this clash tree. And here we have the ID of the structural element and the ID of the mechanical element. So our next goal is actually opening one of these models and checking out this clash. I'm going to open the structural model, so I'm going to take this element ID and I'm going to copy it. I open the Revit model, and I make sure that my mechanical link is linked in this model, so I can see right away what is going on. And now that I've copied this ID, I go to the option Select by ID. I paste that ID that I copied and I click OK. And now I can see that my element is selected. So the best option here is to actually go to the selection box while this element is selected. And now we see the full clash of these two elements. I just pull up and around my selection box so I can see this situation more clearly. And now that I have this full image generated, I can go again to select by ID so I can check whether it is the upper slab or lower slab. And I can see that it is this lower element that is clashing with this mechanical element. So now that you have the full picture of this clash, now you decide what gets done. Basically, you decide whether the structure makes a change or the mechanical model makes a change. And let's say in this case, I think the best thing to do is that this mechanical element gets moved. So once I've made that decision, I just check out this is the number 3. So I'm going to go back to Navis and I'm going to go back to results. So here I have a clash tree. So the next thing I do is I change its status if I want that. I can either leave it as new or active. Basically, these first two options are for the clashes that have not yet been solved, or I can change it to reviewed, approved, or resolved. In this case, for example, since nobody done any update yet, I have just reviewed it, I'm going to leave it as reviewed. In the description, I can add some text if I want to give some bigger context to this clash. And I can also assign it to somebody. In this case, we have decided that the mechanical model has to change this element. So in that case, I can select this clash and I can click assign. So we choose who we assign it to, and we can say, for example, HVAC engineer. And we can also add some notes, for example, move the element by, for example, I don't know how much, 30 centimeters, let's say, left or whatever. Basically, you can either give the very specific instruction of how much you want it to be moved, or you can keep it vague and leave it to the person who is responsible for this. And basically, once you decide for a clash that this is what's going on, you can even assign this. So once you review all of these clashes, some are going to be approved, some are going to be resolved. And once you have done this clash report, you can go back to append and then add more and more models. And then you can do more and more of these tests, and then do more of the reviews and send it out to the disciplines who are doing this project. And that is basically how you do the coordination with Navisworks. But generally, whenever I'm coordinating the projects, first, before even entering Navisworks, I would pay attention to those visible clashes, because once you do the first checkup of the model, you kind of browse through it, you will see some of the biggest clashes. Of course, you will miss a lot of these smaller clashes, but there are some clashes in the project that are always visible. So in order to have less of these clashes detected, you should first just browse through your model and kind of see and resolve those big clashes, and then activate Navisworks when you want to actually check out those smaller clashes, because that way you do not get this giant number of the clashes, but you actually kind of get this number to be a little bit smaller, and you have easier time that way. And this is it for this lesson. If you have any questions, ask in the comments below. I actually try my best to answer all of these questions. And of course, if you like my videos, like and subscribe, and thank you for watching, and see you in the next lesson. Bye! If you want to learn Revit like a pro, take a look at my architectural course through the link below. You will learn how to develop the project from concept to final design using Autodesk Revit. It is ideal for beginners, but valuable for anyone looking to build a solid foundation. By the end, you'll know how to take a design from concept to detailed documentation with confidence and clarity. You will gain a solid Revit workflow you can actually use independently or in work in larger teams in architectural studios. With almost 100 structured video lessons, it is designed to help beginners master Revit step by step. To support your progress, I've included assignments with each lesson, plus the opportunity to ask questions and receive guidance directly from me whenever you need it. This way, you're not just watching tutorials, you're actively learning, practicing, and improving every step of the way. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.